You're holding the baby. Everything is going fine. You're close, face to face, doing the thing, talking in that voice you would never use in a meeting, pulling an expression you would be genuinely embarrassed to see photographed. The baby is locked onto you, completely absorbed, and you feel briefly like the most interesting person in any room anywhere. And then, without preamble, without warning, a small open palm connects squarely with your face. Not a tap, not an accidental brush. A full, committed strike. Maybe a second one follows immediately just to confirm the point. You laugh. Or you say, gentle, gentle, while gently repositioning the hand, secretly wondering if your baby is annoyed with you, asserting some kind of dominance, or simply chaotic in ways you cannot predict or prevent. Everyone around you says the same thing. They don't know what they're doing yet. The movement is random. They can't control their arms properly. Don't read into it. That explanation is the most repeated and least examined piece of folk wisdom in all of early parenting. And the researchers who have spent careers tracking exactly what infant motor behavior communicates have a very different answer. One that most parents will never hear from their pediatrician, because what is actually happening when that small hand finds your face isn't random, isn't aggression, and isn't an accident. And once you understand what it actually is, you will never read that little hand the same way again. Here's the explanation. Everyone reaches for it first. Babies slap because they have no motor control. The arm swings out, the hand lands somewhere, and whatever face it finds is purely a matter of proximity and geometry. The movement is reflexive, undirected, basically meaningless. And this sounds entirely reasonable because newborn motor behavior genuinely is undirected. The Moro reflex, that full-body startle response where both arms fling outward, looks exactly like wild, purposeless movement. It is not unreasonable to extend that logic forward into the first months of life. Arms flail, faces get hit, no deeper story required. The problem is that motor control and communicative intent are not the same variable, and researchers who study them separately find very different timelines. Intentional reaching, goal-directed arm movement toward a specific target begins emerging as early as 3 to 4 months in some infants, with controlled voluntary reach consolidating between 4 and 6 months. By 5 to 6 months, the brain has developed sufficient integration between the motor planning regions and the social processing regions to produce purposeful physical contact as a form of communication. The baby reaching for your face at 5 months is not doing the same thing neurologically as a newborn's Moro reflex. The underlying hardware has been completely rebuilt. Your baby isn't flailing. Your baby is reaching out, when your face is the most important target in their world. But here's where it gets stranger. Because when researchers started measuring what is actually happening in the infant brain during physical contact with the caregiver's face, what they found wasn't just interesting, it reframed what we thought intentional communication even was. Researchers studying infant-directed motor behavior and social contingency, including work coming out of the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, have tracked something specific in the way infant arms move toward caregivers' faces. The technique involves motion capture kinematics combined with caregiver response logging, mapping the precise trajectory, velocity, and force of infant arm movements, and correlating them against what the caregiver does next. What the kinematic data shows is that when infants in the 4 to 7 month window make contact with a caregiver's face, the movement is not ballistic, not a launch with a random landing point. The arm decelerates as it approaches the target. That deceleration is the kinematic signature of intentional reach, the same pattern that distinguishes a person carefully placing a glass on a table from someone dropping it. It is not reflex, it is aim. And then comes the part that changes everything. Infants repeat this behavior in direct proportion to caregiver responsiveness. Respond to the contact, any response, a wince, a laugh, a spoken word, and the behavior increases. Ignore it completely, and it decreases. That is operant learning. That is a baby running a structured experiment on the most important variable in their environment. Think of it as a diagnostic ping. When an engineer tests whether two systems are actually connected, they send a signal and wait to see what returns. Your baby's hand is that signal. Your face is the system being tested. Every reaction you produce on the laugh, the "we use gentle hands," The mildly betrayed expression is a return signal confirming the connection is live. Research published in Developmental Science suggests that infants as young as 4 months detect contingency, whether their action produced a response, within approximately 3 seconds, roughly the time it takes to read a single sentence aloud. 3 seconds. That is how fast the developing nervous system is checking its own work. Your baby isn't hitting you. Your baby is testing whether you respond, because your response is the most important data in their universe. Now I need to tell you about what happens when researchers look not just at the hand, but at the face the baby is watching while the hand moves. Because that is where the real story is. And it is not what anyone expected. Researchers studying cross-modal integration in infancy, the cognitive process of combining information from 2 different senses simultaneously, have found that when an infant makes physical contact with a caregiver's face while visually tracking it, they are running something more than a social experiment. They are running a calibration procedure. Work in this area, including research associated with the Center for Brain and Cognitive Development at Birkbeck, University of London, points toward a process in which tactile input and visual processing are not operating in separate channels. They are being actively cross-referenced. The hand that touches your nose is confirming what the eyes already see. The fingers that find your cheekbone are sharpening the internal model the brain has been constructing since the first hours of life. Touch is not supplementing vision here. Touch is verifying it. Why does this make sense? Because at this stage of development, the visual world is still not fully stable for an infant. Object permanence, the understanding that things continue to exist when out of sight, is still being assembled. Your face is the single most consequential object in the baby's entire environment. Tactile confirmation that you are solid, present, and physically real carries genuine neurological weight. By 6 months, a baby has accumulated tens of thousands of face viewing episodes focused on one primary caregiver, more concentrated observation of a single subject than most adults dedicate to anything they study in an entire year. The hand reaching for your face is precision calibration of a data set that size. Your baby isn't slapping you. Your baby is mapping you, building a 3-dimensional model of the most important face in their world, one touch at a time. Now I need to tell you what this means for you specifically. Not just what is happening inside the baby's brain, but what is actually at stake in how you respond to that small hand. Because there is a researcher whose work answers this question, and what he found is one of the most replicated and most unsettling results in all of developmental psychology. The still face paradigm was designed in 1975 by Dr. Edward Tronick, then at Harvard Medical School. The setup is deceptively simple. A caregiver interacts normally with their infant, warm, responsive, mirroring the baby's expressions and sounds. The baby is engaged, reaching, communicating in the only language available to them. Then, on cue, the caregiver goes completely still. Flat expression, open eyes, total non-response, present in body, absent in every other way. What unfolds in the 90 seconds that follow is one of the most studied behavioral sequences in the field. The baby notices immediately. They try to re-engage, bigger smiles, more insistent reaching, escalating vocalization, all the tools that have worked before. Nothing comes back. They try harder. The gestures grow more urgent, the reaching becomes more forceful. And then, within roughly 90 seconds, less time than most people spend deciding what to have for lunch, cortisol levels rise, heart rate elevates, and many infants shift into a flat, withdrawn state that mirrors the caregiver's blankness. What the baby was reaching for, in every sense, was confirmation. I touched you. You registered me. I exist in relation to you. The absence of that confirmation is not experienced by the developing nervous system as neutral. It registers as a system failure. And here's what that means for you. Every time your baby's hand finds your face and you respond, you look at it, you say something, you redirect it gently, you make a face, you are not managing a behavior. You are completing a circuit. You are telling the nervous system on the other end of that hand that its signal has weight, that its reach lands somewhere real, that there is someone on the other side of the connection. That is not bonding language. That is load-bearing infrastructure. Your baby isn't demanding attention. Your baby is asking the most fundamental question a person can ask, do I exist to you? And every time you answer, you build the answer into them permanently. And now I need to say something important. Because there is a version of this behavior that is not cartography, not contingency testing, not the question being asked in a language you did not know to listen for. And if you are seeing it, it matters that you know the difference. The reaching, touching, looking, and waiting that this script has described, physical contact paired with a gaze check back to your eyes to read your reaction, is a healthy communicative pattern. The thing to pay attention to is a specific distortion of it. By somewhere between 7 and 9 months, typically developing infants increasingly pair physical contact with social checking. They touch your face, and then they look at your eyes to see what you do next. They want the return signal. That gaze check is one of the behavioral markers researchers use to track joint attention development, and its emergence in this window is a meaningful milestone, even if it looks like nothing more than a baby being briefly curious about your expression. If an infant in this window consistently makes physical contact without the accompanying gaze check, reaches and touches without tracking the result, or if physical contact remains forceful and escalating without the contingency-sensitive modulation that calms when responded to, those patterns are worth noting. Not as a checklist, not as a diagnostic framework you run at home, as a conversation to have with a pediatrician. Every baby develops on a different timeline, and a single moment, a single day, a single week tells you very little. What you're looking for is a sustained pattern, not an instance. It does not mean something is wrong. Early identification, when something does warrant attention, changes outcomes in ways that later identification cannot replicate. The brain's capacity for reorganization in the first 2 years is never that high again. If something about the pattern of how your baby reaches for you, not just the reach, but what comes after it, feels different to you, trust that instinct. You have logged more hours reading that specific face than any researcher ever will. You are the most sensitive instrument that exists for your particular child. And underneath all of it, underneath the motor kinematics and the contingency loops and the cross-modal calibration, there is something this small hand is doing that has no clinical name. And it may be the most important thing of all. The hand that reaches for your face is not looking for your nose. It is not conducting a neurological experiment, though it is. It is not mapping a surface, though it does. What that hand is reaching for, in the only language available to a being with no words, no symbols, no prior experience of being a person, is proof. Proof that another mind is present. Proof that the world outside the self is real and warm and responsive. Before language evolved to ask it, before any human had the architecture to form the question, the hand went out and touched the face of someone close and waited to see what came back. Your baby is doing that right now. So the next time a small hand connects with your face, hard, without apology, with a follow-through that suggests genuine commitment, remember what is actually happening. That hand is running a diagnostic on the most important system in your baby's world. It is mapping your face with the focus of a brain doing the most demanding construction work it will ever do. It is asking whether you are real, whether you register, whether the connection is live. And every response you give, every wince, every laugh, every completely ineffective, gentle, directed at someone who does not yet have the word for gentle, is writing the answer into the architecture of who they are becoming. The self is not given. It is built, contact by contact, response by response, in the space between a baby's hand and a caregiver's face. Has your baby done this? Not just the slap, but the look after? The way they watch your face to see what you do next, that half-second pause before they decide what to try again? Drop a comment below. Tell me how old they were. Tell me what your reaction was. Because I want to know if you caught it now that you know what you were looking at. And if you want to understand why your baby reaches for you the moment you try to put them down, not because they are overtired, not because they have learned to manipulate you, but because of something happening deep inside their attachment system that most parenting advice gets completely backwards, that is the next video. And once you understand what is actually going on, you will never feel like you are doing something wrong by responding again.